The name's Veronica Valentine. But don't let that romantic moniker fool you. The game, in theory, is chasing after love. Though lately it feels more like I'm the one who's on the run.
Oh, thank God.
You see, a dame without loyalties, it seems, has a certain magnetism to men. After a long stint on the inside of that lockdown we call monogamy, it's as if the scent of freedom creates a gravitational pull on unsuspecting victims. It's all enough to get a rookie in a heap of trouble, trying to discern the good guys from the bad. Thankfully, I'm no rookie. You see, the key is to keep them guessing. The less a suspect knows of your motives, the more you can play both sides of the coin. Never let yourself get too involved, and you'll seldom find yourself staring down the business end of the love gun. My last few years on the inside proved all too well that I'd much rather be the one pulling the trigger than getting shot through the heart. That's why this round, I'm keeping my distance. Get in the room, take what you need, and get back out before anyone gets hurt. And again, sometimes you've got to do a little follow-up questioning to get the full story.
This is Last Chance Pizzeria. Can I take your order?
Yeah, I'll have a pizza with vegan cheese and extra onions. This week's suspect started off a real hot lead. The initial interrogations went well. Clever, but not too conspicuous. The rendezvous point was set for the perfect location. Just public enough to alleviate any nerves, but not so public that the suspect would feel too exposed. I arrived at our rendezvous on time and ready to absorb the mutual interrogations to follow. And I waited. And waited. And waited. But the suspect never showed. Stop with the spam, guys. Then again, a good interrogator knows how to get the information she needs without the suspect's knowing cooperation. Let's stake out the past 24 hours, shall we? Clearly, the suspect was well caffeinated, so that rules out being detained by sleep. His whereabouts were known at approximately 12 p.m. the night before, so that rules out any suspicious late-night activities. What could possibly have happened between last night and this afternoon to cause him to get cold feet? Well, mystery solved. Normally, when conducting an investigation, a good detective would leave the aftermath of a crime relatively untouched. But in tonight's case, the scene was simply too gruesome not to erase all evidence that it happened. This week's suspect was no smooth criminal. The evidence was there from the moment he arrived on the scene, reeking of onions. You don't have to have a nose for the truth to get to the bottom of that story. The events of the encounter were brief, but surprisingly messy. Coffee? Not exactly the weapon of choice to cover the indiscretions of lunch. Accessorized by the type of conversation that does little to distract from his former offenses. Who knew there could be so many hard H sounds in the answer to how was your day? Though it felt as if the olfactory torture might never end. Eventually, the suspect began to tire. And it appeared he might leave the victim relatively unscathed. That is until moments before her release, when he lurched in suddenly, armed with loaded breath and a trigger-happy tongue. The resulting kiss left evidence of his crimes not only in, but all around the mouth of the victim. There are certain dating crimes that are unforgivable, and a deadly kiss is high amongst them. Perhaps someday, offenders such as these will be brought to justice for their crimes. But until that day, none of us are safe. Ooh, extra onions. Hi. Come on in. Can I get you a drink? In a case where there are endless suspects, the search for love can sometimes turn up a titillating tip-off. You can head on in and make yourself comfortable. It's rare to find a suspect who not only fits the profile, but also promises a pulse-popping pursuit. There are certain interrogations best served slow. It's better to allow the suspense to build to a climactic breaking point. Hope you like your bourbon on the rocks. Sometimes a dame needs a double dose of courage before the chase can begin. What kind of incriminating evidence do you have on your phone that's so interesting, huh? You know, the other day I was downtown, and it's so crazy that we live in the cities that we are surrounded by people. Like there were so many people around, and you don't know any of them. And you're sitting right If you're not here to get to know me, what are you doing here at all? And sometimes the catch of the day turns out to be a red herring. I guess that's why they say there's plenty of fish in the sea. I've spent hours going over the evidence, reviewing the statements, and replaying the events over and over in my mind. Yet a motive still seems impossible to finger. It started out a seemingly open and shut case. We'd known each other for a while, and had become the sort of friends who'd drink out of the same bottle. So when the suspect requested we meet for drinks alone, the motive felt clear. This was a date. And a welcome distraction from another case I still wasn't sure how to solve. That is, until the string of events that followed became a bit harder to nail down. The trail with this suspect ran hot and then suddenly cold. He'd skip from flirtatious to suspicious in a single breath. During interrogations, he was a willing participant, but not exactly a cooperative witness. I could never quite find myself on his level, or perhaps he never found himself on mine. And even with all the evidence gathered together, the answers still remain elusive. Perhaps some mysteries just aren't meant to be solved. In the game of love, it's hard to tell who's on what side. As long as no one shows their cards, it's easy to assume that everyone's playing at the same game. But what if once the bets are placed, you find you were playing two of a kind, and they thought hearts were wild? And things get even more complicated when you find you're not the only two in the game. That's when the strategy shifts from playing a team to every dame for herself. never been the kind of girl to hold my cards close to my chest. But when a suspect refuses to show his hand, it makes a dame eager to call his bluff. Because even when the cards you're holding don't play out the way you planned, there's always the hope that you could hit an unexpected backdoor flush. And especially when you're playing for keeps, you've got to know when to hold them and when it's simply better off to fold, even when you'd really rather stay in the game. This week's repeat offender has a rap sheet a mile long. He was my partner in crime for nearly 22 months before my cover was blown. He discovered I wasn't the perfect dame he thought I was. But when you're in that deep, it's impossible not to rack up a list of offenses on both sides, guilty or not. Now that I've finally gone straight, he's come back begging for one last heist. And I can't say I haven't been tempted. The thrill of the forbidden, paired with the comfort of the familiar, can be an intoxicating cocktail. But if I was born when he kissed me and died when he left me, then I was resurrected when I uncovered the dame I'd lost in between. So if love's a criminal with countless aliases, I just may have found my prime suspect after all.